tariffs and using them to bring back manufacturing to your state?
Yeah, I mean, most of us aren't against tariffs full stop, right? I think tariffs are an important tool in the toolkit. I think the way he's handling tariffs is the way he's handling everything else right now, which is, we want change, but there's reckless change and then there's responsible change. And the way that he's on again, off again, pounding Canada as if they're the exact same thing as China, it just creates this chaotic feeling. And Michigan is probably going to be one of the most affected states in the entire country between our manufacturing sector and our farmers. So I'm not against it in principle, especially against China. But Canadians, I mean, as the state that, for our farmers, that's our number one market is Canada. So I just want a scalpel and not a sledgehammer for these things.
Just to be clear, you oppose the tariffs against Canada, and what about Mexico?
So I think, look, especially the way Secretary Lutnick was just talking about fentanyl, I just want to be clear, we're a couple miles from the U.S.-Canada border right now. The fentanyl coming over the Canadian border last year totaled 43 pounds total. That's a whole different thing than what's going on at the southern border. We know how to manage our border. We know how to provide security for our border. We've been doing it seamlessly for years. So I just think this is what I mean. Like Mexico, we got a fentanyl problem with fentanyl coming in from China through Mexico. With Canada, that to me is a completely different story. So just be specific and thoughtful about these things.
President Trump, who did win your state of Michigan, is making sweeping cuts to the federal government. As you well know, you just heard me talk about that with Secretary Lutnick. I want to play part of your response to the president's joint address this week. Take a look.
You want to cut waste? I'll help you do it. But change doesn't need to be chaotic or make us less safe.
Where are you willing to work with this administration, Senator, to find those cuts, to make the government more efficient?
Yeah, I mean, I worked in the Pentagon, I worked in the CIA, I did a rotation over at the State Department, and I think if you ask anyone in a, sort of without the cameras on, like, okay, in each department, is there fat? Yeah, right? We know there is. Are there missions that are pretty outdated that we could cut, right? That were maybe like Cold War missions that have just endured? Yeah. So I think that people who know these organizations would be happy to show you where that fat is. And if you said to a department or agency, you have to cut 10%, 15%, whatever, and then you actually do it so that you're not making Americans less safe. I think what we have right now is this kind of reckless approach, which is kind of putting all of the information from these agencies into some artificial intelligence empowered software, figuring out keywords, cutting and pasting people, and it's not reflective of the missions of who they're supposed to be serving and who they're keeping safe. I think about the VA, right? Cutting the VA and some of the proposals I've seen are going to hurt service to veterans. So let's agree that that's a bad idea, bipartisan. It's a bad idea to do that. So I think there are ways to do it. And again, I would be helped. I mean, I certainly, when I was at the Pentagon, could tell you places in that place that I would have cut if I had the power to do it. But this kind of willy-nilly approach makes us less safe.
Senator, Democrats were in charge for 4 years. You were in Congress at the time. Why didn't Democrats do more to cut government spending when they were in charge?
Yeah, I think what we have right now, I mean, I think if I can just be blunt about it, is, we have a situation where the politics are so broken between Democrats and Republicans that what seems logical, right? People getting in a room and saying, look, we got to live within our means. That means we can't spend as much and we can't cut, the money coming in to the household, to the federal budget by millions and millions and millions. We have to make the balance work. Neither party trusts the other one, right? So Democrats are saying, well, I'm not going to cut spending until you deal something, don't give those tax breaks to those very, very wealthy people. The Republicans say the same thing. We're not going to change until you change. And you have a situation where debt is out of control. So to me, I think you're right that both parties need to do better. And act like adults and get in a room and shut out Twitter and the media and actually deal with our deficit, our debt.
Well, let's talk about how your party reacted to President Trump's joint address this week. The House has now censured Congressman Al Green because he interrupted, was jeering at the president. You served in the House, Senator Slotkin. Would you have voted to censure Congressman Green for his behavior?
You know, look, I think to me, there's so much frustration with the Trump administration. There's so much concern that what you saw was sort of the emotion and wanting to be visible. It's not personally the way I reacted. You saw my speech. I have a different approach. I think what I try to focus on is like, we can't just be against something. We have to be for something. What do we want to do? What do Democrats want to do that's different? And how do we hear the fact that the country wants change? We want something different, and offer an alternative vision. So look, I know Congressman Green, and it was clearly something he felt very passionately. It's just not my number one go-to approach.
In his first episode of his new podcast, another big figure in your party, California Governor Gavin Newsom, brought on Republican strategist Charlie Kirk, who then asked Newsom about the debate over transgender athletes. Let's take a listen to a little bit of that conversation.
Would you say no men in female sports?
Well, I think it's an issue of fairness. I completely agree with you on that. It is an issue of fairness.
So
it's deeply unfair.
You...
I revere sports, and so the issue of fairness is completely legit.
Senator, do you agree with Governor Newsom?
Well, look, I think, you'll have to talk to Mr. Newsom and his podcast, and we're all talking about it now because it's, good controversy. For me, I grew up playing 3 seasons of sports. In Michigan, sports is like our religion, right? I wouldn't be here, I think, without the leadership training that I got in women's sports. But for me, it's like, let the local community figure this out, right? In Michigan, we have a process in place where if someone who's born a boy wants to play in women's sports, you have to get a waiver. We've had it happen 2 times in our entire state. So let the local communities, just like everything with schools, handle that issue. For me, though, I think, this issue is being sort of brought up in order to make sparks and see sparks fly.
2 quick questions. We're almost out of time. Since you delivered the Democratic response this week, a lot of eyes on you, Senator. Who would you say is the leader of the Democratic Party right now?
Look, people know me. I'm pretty straightforward. I don't think it's a secret that Democrats have been on their heels since Trump won the election, right? I don't think that's something hidden. And I think it's on us to be clear about not only leadership, and there's lots of leaders in both parties, but also a strategy, right? And I think that's something that as Trump has been successful in flooding the zone and just like every day, 15 things happening, we are still finding our footing. And I think you can't get better until you admit you have a problem. And for me, that's one of the things that I think some of the new voices in the party have really been agitating about, right? New senators, new representatives, new folks who are like, hey, we need to do more, and we need to be showing that we're actually having a plan to stand up on really important moments of inflection. So that's what I'm trying to do from within.
Well, finally, as you well know, the government is poised to run out of money on Friday. The House did release the text of their bill to keep the government open. Will you vote yes to keep the government open, Senator? Do you support this bill?
Well, we just got the bill yesterday, so we're still looking through it. And it has to go through the House, and they have very tight margins in the House. So we'll see if it can get through. But I think the fundamental point, at least as I approach this, is, look, the president has been deciding how to spend the money any way he wants, even when we have a budget that both Democrats and Republicans voted on. That's a constitutional issue, right? Everyone knows Congress has the power of the purse. So until I see some assurances that whatever we pass next week is going to ensure that the money is spent the way Congress intends, I'm gonna withhold my vote until I see that.
All right. Well, we'll follow up with you, Senator Slotkin. Thank you so much for joining us after a big week. Appreciate all of your insights, all of your answers and conversation this morning. Great to see you. And